This video will walk you through how to produce for Florida Focus using rundowns in our Box Excel online sheets. This is an example of one of the rundowns that we had for a past show, and you'll see if you look through the rundown folders a wide variety of rundown styles, which is a reflection of the producer's creativity, but also depends on what news of the day you have. Your rundown may change depending on the content. So I kind of want to show you a couple of examples, and then I'll jump in and explain how to read them, because even if you're not producing, you have to understand how to read a rundown, not just for Florida Focus, but for any TV job. And that's not just TV news jobs. There are a lot of TV stations that use rundowns in a similar way that we're going to be using it in our class. And it is formatted to basically look like industry standard. So I have a couple of examples. This is a screenshot of ENPS. That is a content management system. And part of the content management system's job is to house the rundowns. And then you'll also house the scripts and all of that. This is ENPS. So you'll see our rundown that we created here inside of our Excel box sheet has a similar structure. Depending on which TV station you go to work for, these columns may be in a different order. You may have different functions, but for the most part, if you understand how to read a rundown, you can communicate efficiently in a TV news setting. So all of these things are important for you to understand. This is ENPS. This is an example of iNews. So I know these kind of look different, but they're actually very, very similar. And this is a different type of a show. And here's a different one that you can see. The page, they put talent instead of anchor. They all have the slug, the camera shot. All of these are very consistent because you need to know all of this information in order to use your show. So if you want to learn more about ENPS or iNews, you can go ahead and read this really helpful iNews manual that I've put in Canvas. You can also check out the Producing Broadcast News lecture on JeanetteAbrahamson.com. There's about an hour-long video here, and it just walks you through how to use ENPS and what all of these things mean, so that if you do end up producing at a TV station, you know how to build this. But even if you end up doing any role, floor director, reporter, anchor, you do need to understand that the producer will communicate using the rundown. The reason for this is that there's not enough time in the day for the producer to go around to every single person and tell them using complete sentences what their responsibilities are. So the rundown is what everyone in TV is expected to understand, just to look at this and know exactly what's going to happen. So this can be a little overwhelming because what I'm showing you here are really long shows. But I'm going to show you for Florida Focus a smaller, more simple version so that you could work your way up into understanding how to read and create rundowns for a TV show. So here's an example of one of the rundowns we used in November of 2020. And in this instance, the first page here, so page number 1, is our show open. You're almost always going to start with your show open. And in this instance is a SOT vote. Sometimes your open is going to be just a straight SOT. Sometimes it's going to have video. Other times it's going to have graphics. Sometimes your anchor is going to be reading a continued VO. And so there's a wide variety of things that you could do in your open. In this instance, the producer decided to create a special open, and that's why it's a SOT VO. And when you go over to the estimated time, you'll see that this open is 14 seconds long. When we are using the Excel sheets for us to work in Florida Focus, it says 12 a.m. Kind of ignore that. Really what we're looking for is this number here. So this is 14 seconds. This one is 5 seconds. This is also 14 seconds. This is 19 seconds. We had to format it as a time because we're using Excel as kind of a workaround because we don't have access to really expensive softwares like ENPS or iNews. But it is very similar if you look at the way that that's formatted with the back timing or front timing. You'll notice that it's a very similar concept. So let me go ahead and just show you what each one of these lines looks like, and then later I'll show you how to actually create the rundown. So the open in this instance is a SOTVO. So let's go to that show. This is the standard Florida Focus open. And when I unmute it, you'll be able to hear that there's actually a different music underneath, which is great. So the producer in this instance picked specific music to match the tone of the story that we're using as our lead.
250,000 Americans have now died from COVID-19. That's more than twice the number of U.S. service members killed in World War I.
Okay, so we saw this was the SOT, right? This part was the SOT, and then when we started hearing the anchor's voice, that's the continued VO. So that's the SOT, and then the anchor's voice with those graphics, that's the continued VO. So this is the SOTVO.
Americans have now died from COVID-19. That's more than twice the number of U.S. service members killed in World War I. Welcome to Florida Focus. I'm Kaylee Cottrell.
Okay, so what we're seeing now is on page 2, that's the hello. And we're using split screens in this specific show, but other shows may start on a one shot or a different kind of shot. We also have lower thirds on our anchors, and you can see our anchor initials here, Kaylee and Dylan. And so when we go back here, you'll see, yep, this is a split screen. Kaylee and Dylan's lower thirds are up, and they're saying hello. So the next thing we're going to see is page number 3, and that's going to be a stinger. Stingers are great, especially for the lead story so that you can brand the story, but it's also used as a way to transition from one shot to another. In this instance, we're transitioning from a split screen to an over-the-shoulder shot with one of our anchors. So we're going from 2 anchors to 1 anchor. And if we don't have a stinger there, some kind of graphic element to separate those shots, it could look kind of like a jump cut. But in addition to it kind of being like a little band-aid, it really does elevate the production quality. It also helps your viewers understand what the story is about. So this next thing we're going to see on page 3 is your stinger. Dylan is going to be reading that, and you can tell that that Dylan's voice is going to be because it has a VO. So it's not a SOT stinger, which is when the anchor wouldn't be reading anything at all. We don't do a lot of SOT stingers in Florida Focus, but we totally could. And you might work at a station that does a SOT stinger, which is either pre-produced, like somebody's voice reading something, or maybe it's a soundbite or something else that's woven into this graphic element that looks like a stinger. So this is what I'm talking about, what you're going to see here in just a second.
And Don Dylan Zuccarello. Despite the new gruesome milestone, Tampa International Airport is resuming nonstop international flights today for the first time since.
So that was the stinger. The stinger was full screen, and it also matches the lead sentence that the anchor is going to be reading here in page 4. So all of this is one story. Florida COVID update is one story here. It includes these elements: the stinger that we just watched, the over-the-shoulder or OTS graphic that Dylan is reading on OTS-R, and you can see that it's OTS-R because it's on the right side, as opposed to if we had a different angle from the studio and the over-the-shoulder graphic was on the left side. And in this instance, after the VO, we're going to hear a SOT, and then Dylan's going to pause and then continue reading the VO after that. And this should take 14 seconds for the lead and the VO, and then the SOTVO should take about 19 seconds. So let's go ahead and watch that so that you can understand what the stinger VO-SOTVO looks like.
Since March, but there is some hope on the horizon. Tampa General Hospital just announced it'll be among the first in Florida to receive the new COVID-19 vaccine.
There's going to be teachers, there's going to be parents or guardians who have health issues. We got to protect those. We got to make sure our kids are getting the best education.
Top Florida education officials just announced that students will be allowed to continue virtual learning through the end of the school year. On Monday, the Hillsborough County School District reported its highest daily number of cases so far.
The pandemic.
So that was the VO-SOTVO, and that's a really helpful story format if you are telling something that is multidimensional or several parts, because really this is like several different stories in one. And often a big story like COVID will have lots of breakout elements. And in this case, we were able to format it as a vo-sot-vo, where we kind of started on a different topic and then led it through with that soundbite, and were able to end it on the continued VO that added additional information in kind of a coherent flow of information. And so that's part of the producer's job to consider, what information do I have? And in this case, is it one story? Is it several elements in a story? And in this case, it's a really great use case because COVID will have lots of these type of elements where perhaps the VO is one topic, and then it leads into the SOT-VO. So the producer has to flow information kind of seamlessly in a coherent and logical way to get as much information to the show as possible in as little time. So this was the lead story, right? Florida COVID update is the lead. The next thing we're going to see here is Kaylee on a one shot. Her camera or her background is the control room, and this is a virtual control room. Kaylee's going to be reading the lead-in or the toss to this package, and then we have a one-shot tag. That's also in the control room. And this is the second story. We're going to have about 11 seconds for the toss. The package is 28 seconds, and the tag is about 10 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and show you just a little bit of that so you can understand what this looks like inside of a TV show.
Created incredible challenges for pregnant women, but women of color are much more likely to die because of it. Reporter Carla Ibanez explains how racial disparities in healthcare are hurting families.
Even before the virus spread, pregnant women of color experience many.
So now we have the package. That's what we're watching right here on page 7. And when the package is over, we're going to go back to Kaylee, exact same shot. You could change the shot if you had a reason to, but in this instance, it made sense just to end the package on a tag. After the shot, you'll see the reporter sig out and with a look live, and then we're going to go back to Kaylee as a one shot in the control room for the anchor tag.
The lack of health insurance, hot
Focus on Monday for an in-depth special report. Carla shares the story of a father who was left to raise his baby alone after his fiancée died during childbirth.
So
that was the tag. We actually pushed ahead to the story that was coming up on another day. You could use the tag for that, or you could also use a tag to give additional information about your story. This next story here, we have Dylan with an OTSR. Solar energy saves. So this is also a toss to a package. Dylan is OTSR, lead-in, toss to a package. Dylan is going to read for 11 seconds, and then we have a package by Diana that's going to be 29 seconds. And so you could watch all of these on our YouTube channel and follow along with the rundown to see that all of this matches so that you can understand how to read rundowns a little bit better. And then we have our reporter sig out tag here. And then we end on a split screen. So this is the goodbye. We have a split screen. Kaylee reads first, then Dylan reads for about 5 seconds, and then we have the close, and the close is a SOT.
Florida Focus.
have a great evening.
So that's the SOT. Usually we have about 5 seconds for the close. Sometimes we have to shorten it to about 3. Other times we can make it a little bit longer so that we hit our 2:30 showtime. And you can see here on the right, we have the writer's names, whoever's editing the OTS, the video editor names, and then on the very right, anytime a graphic or video or something has been approved, you'll see there are notes here on the side that they are done, they're ready to go, and they are improved in box. Here's another example of a rundown. You'll see there's one rundown on the top, and then there's another version of the rundown on the bottom. This may happen if we have a lot of content and we want to air all of that content, but it doesn't fit inside of the 2 minute and 30 second showtime. So if it's longer than 2 minutes and 30 seconds, like in this instance, if we have packages that are much longer, we may have the reporters compress their packages for air, so they will end up with about a 2 minute and 30 second show for PBS, but then we can publish the rest of the content on our YouTube channel and on our website because we don't have a time limit for that. So you may see this sometimes where, okay, this is our show. We don't have enough time to air everything that we want to air, but we're going to create a separate rundown if we're adding additional stories or perhaps if we have longer packages. And in this case, we ended up adding a story, and so that meant we had to have anchors read different things, and so there's some notes here. So you may see this. If you see this, that's what's happening. The rundown on the top is always going to be the rundown for PBS. In this instance, we have an open, and that's the SOT. That is the standard Florida Focus open, and that is about 6 seconds long. Then we went straight out to the hello with a split screen with both of our anchors. Then we had a stinger, an OTS shot, a package, a different anchor was on a one shot, tossing to a package, and then our anchor from the beginning came back on an OTS shot and read a SOTVO, then a split goodbye. Of course, we have our writers, our OTS, video editors, full screen, all of that. And so hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense. If it's still hard to kind of understand how to read these things, make sure that you understand the story forms and that you can be more comfortable with all of the terminology like SOT, stinger, package, lead, and OTS. All of those are things that you have to understand in order to be able to read the rundown. So please refer back to Canvas. At the very beginning of our modules, there's a list of vocab that you could look back here and check so that you understand all of this. This is important. It's not something that's going to go away if you don't understand it now. You have to understand how to do this, not just for Florida Focus, but for really any TV station, no matter what role you have, because everybody is going to be reading the rundown. Everybody is expected to follow the rundown. This is how we all communicate on the same page. So these are the rundowns. In the next video, you will see how to create the rundown if you are the producer.